How would you feel if your own daughter told you that you were a confused old man who had lost his mind, wanted to betray you, take all your assets, and put you in a nursing home? I have experienced that. Before continuing, please comment below to let me know where you are watching this video. I spent a lifetime restoring broken things, believing that everything could be saved. But when I overheard my own daughter planning to sell my business and my home, I learned that some bonds are too broken to be fixed. The real value in an old man's wisdom isn't in what he keeps, but in what he's willing to let go of. And my family was about to learn that lesson. My life's work wasn't just my hands repairing intricate clocks. It was in the very walls of my antique shop in Charleston, a prime piece of real estate in a city that breathes history. I am John Harris, a retired watchmaker, and for 30 years. This shop and the apartment above it have been my sanctuary. My late wife, Ellen, was the soul of this place. She helped me build it, filling our lives with a warmth that even now, years after her passing, still echoes in every room. We raised our daughter, Diane, here. I always believed this sanctuary would be her inheritance, a testament to our love and hard work. Now, she is a real estate developer, married to a financial analyst named Greg, a sharp young man I thought I could trust. That afternoon, the Charleston sun filtered through the shop's front window, painting stripes of light on the hardwood floor. I was at my workbench, a familiar, comforting rhythm that I believed would carry me through my remaining years. It was then that my cell phone buzzed. It was Diane. I picked it up, unaware that the quiet rhythm of my life was about to be shattered. The phone in my hand buzzed with Diane's name, pulling me from the intricate gears of the vintage pocket watch. I picked it up, my heart a little lighter just hearing her voice. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice was a familiar comfort, but I could hear a forced cheerfulness in her tone. I leaned back in my worn leather chair. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished mending a vintage pocket watch. A watchmaker's hands never get old, they just get wiser," I replied. "That's sweet. Dad, listen, I have to go. Greg and I have a meeting with a client, a very important one. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Be careful." I heard a faint click, followed by the rustle of a handbag. I assumed she had hung up, but the line remained open. Then I heard Greg's deep, matter-of-fact voice, and my blood ran cold. "You see how he is, honey?" Her voice was no longer soft and caring, but sharp, calculating. "He's losing his focus. It's only a matter of time before he burns the shop down." My hands, which had so recently been working with delicate precision, now trembled uncontrollably. I gripped the receiver, unable to move, unable to breathe. "It's time, Diane," Greg said, his voice cold. "Our last quarterly report was a disaster. We need that capital to stay afloat, and that prime piece of real estate is our only way out." "I know." Diane's tone was all business. "A friend of mine at the city council says that property alone is worth well over $1 million. With the shop's history, we could get even more. It's a gold mine. We could finally get out of this mess." Then I heard them laugh. Not a laugh of joy, but of a shared, venomous secret. "So, what's the plan for him?" Diane asked. "We sell the house, put him in a decent nursing home, not too expensive, and we finally buy that house in Boulder we've been looking at," Greg replied. The words hit me like a physical blow. The antique shop, the home I built, the legacy I thought was priceless, was just a financial asset, a gold mine to them. And I was nothing but a burden to be warehoused, as they say. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor, a symbol of a promise broken. It was not the silence of peace, but the deafening silence of a broken heart. My daughter, the girl I raised in these very walls, wanted to get rid of me, and she was already planning how to spend my life's work. The phone lay on the hardwood floor, a silent witness to a conversation that had shattered my world. I sat in the sudden quiet, surrounded by the objects I had dedicated my life to restoring, each one now a monument to my naive belief that everything could be mended. The old grandfather clock, Ellen's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, ticked steadily in the hallway. Its rhythm, once a comforting presence, now felt like a countdown to my own obsolescence. The pain was a physical weight in my chest, a cold lump of betrayal that made it hard to breathe. My own daughter, the girl I had raised in these very walls, had decided I was no longer a father to be cherished, but a problem to be solved. My home, the sanctuary Ellen and I had built with our sweat and love, was just a line item on their financial report, a resource to be liquidated. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Ellen's face watching me from her framed photograph on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to hold a mixture of disappointment and warning, a terrible knowledge of what was to come. I thought about her last words to me, a promise she made me swear to keep. Don't let them take advantage of you. John. I had failed that promise already. I had given them so much love and support that they had come to believe it was their right, not a gift. But in the cold, hard silence of the shop, the grief slowly began to give way to something else, a cold, focused fury that I hadn't felt since my days as a young watchmaker. A craftsman doesn't fix a watch by yelling at it. He fixes it by observing, analyzing, and then acting with surgical precision. And a father doesn't confront a betrayal with anger. He confronts it with wisdom. I wasn't confused or helpless. I was meticulous. My mind, trained for decades to see the intricate connections between gears and springs, began to work on a new problem, a different kind of restoration. The silence became my greatest weapon. They thought I was oblivious. I would let them keep thinking that. I would play the role of the confused old man perfectly, while quietly, methodically, and with all the precision of a master watchmaker. I would dismantle their cruel plot and rebuild my own life. My first step was clear. I needed a lawyer. Not the one Diane would recommend, but one that she and Greg would never find. My plan began with a quiet, methodical precision that felt both foreign and familiar. It was the same process I'd used to rebuild a clock's inner workings from a pile of rusted parts. But this time, the gears were my own life. I began to liquidate the most valuable assets from my private collection, the pieces Ellen and I had acquired over a lifetime. Each one held a story, a memory. I sold the French carriage clock we'd bought on our 25th anniversary, the one that chimed the hours with a delicate, lilting song. I sold the rare, first edition pocket watch from the late 1800s that Ellen had found at a flea market, its face painted with a miniature portrait of a young woman who looked like her. Every transaction felt like cutting a piece of my past away, a painful but necessary act. I wasn't just selling objects. I was converting my legacy into an invisible, untraceable force. My new legal counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney in a neighboring state, guided me through the financial maze. We transferred every cent into a secure, private account, a fortress. No one, especially Diane and Greg, would ever find. I felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of self-doubt. Was this right? Was I being as cold and calculating as they were? But then my phone would ring. "Dad, it's Diane. Just calling to check in." Her voice was a sugary sweet pretense. "How's your day going?" "Oh, sweetheart," I'd reply, my voice a little slower, a little more confused than usual. "Just, puttering around the shop." I think I forgot what I was doing a minute ago. A nervous, calculated laugh would echo through the phone from her end. "That's okay. Dad, it happens to all of us." I could almost hear her giving Greg a knowing look, reinforcing the lie I was so carefully constructing. They were convinced I was deteriorating, that their cruel plan would be a simple, clean, and profitable one. They had no idea that beneath the surface of my gentle confusion, a master watchmaker was working, his hands steady, his mind sharper than ever. Every call, every half-truth, was a gear in my new, deceptive clock, ticking away toward the day when they would finally realize that they had underestimated me. My lawyer's referral to a trusted real estate broker was my next move, a man named Mr. Thompson, who specialized in discreet, high-value properties. I explained my unique requirements to him over the phone. "It's not just about the money, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice slow and deliberate. "This place, the shop, it holds a lifetime of memories. I need a buyer who won't tear it down for some modern condo. I need someone who understands its soul." There was a long pause on the other end, a moment of professional silence. "I think I have just the person," he finally said. "Her name is Lena. She's a young woman, very passionate about history and antique restoration. She's been looking for a place like yours to start her own business." Our meeting with Lena took place a few days later, in the quiet of my shop after closing hours. She walked through the space with a reverent awe that instantly put me at ease. Her fingers traced the intricate carvings on a Victorian sideboard, and her eyes lit up as she examined a collection of old maritime tools. She wasn't just seeing objects, she was seeing their stories. "This is incredible. Mr. Harris," she whispered, her voice full of genuine admiration. "I can feel the history in these walls." We sat and talked for hours, me telling her about the pieces, her telling me about her dream of preserving the past for a new generation. She was sharp, knowledgeable, and most importantly, she had the same fire in her eyes that Ellen had when we first bought this place. I knew then that I had found the right person. The negotiations were swift and to the point. The property, located in a prime part of Charleston, was indeed worth a small fortune. But for me, the real deal was in the promise of its future. Lena agreed to keep the shop in its original spirit, to honor its history, and to continue the legacy of restoration. The final price, a staggering sum that reflected the high market value of the land, was more than enough to secure my future. The closing date was set for a few days after Diane and Greg were scheduled to return from their business trip. They would come home to a surprise they never saw coming. As I shook Lena's hand, a quiet sense of peace settled over me. I wasn't losing my home. I was passing on a legacy to a new keeper. My hands, which had restored so many broken things, had finally found a way to restore my own sense of purpose. The final piece of my deceptive clock was now in place, ticking steadily toward the moment of truth. My last day in the shop was a quiet, solemn affair. I walked through the rooms that had been the backdrop to my entire life, not as an owner, but as a ghost. I packed a single suitcase, not with clothes, but with the essentials of my existence: Ellen's jewelry box, our wedding photo, and a small, intricate locket she had given me on our first anniversary. My hands, trained to restore broken things, now carefully sealed away the memories of a life I was leaving behind. I paused in the living room, staring at the empty space where the burgundy sofa used to be. A sudden memory came unbidden, a flicker of a forgotten moment. Ellen, her face flushed with paint, laughing as she wrote Harris's Antiques on the shop sign. "It's perfect, John," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "Our name, our life, a piece of us for everyone to see." I had smiled, kissing the paint from her cheek, feeling a happiness so profound it ached. "It's just the beginning," I had replied, a promise of a future that felt endless. Now, as I stood in the empty room, I knew that beginning had finally come to an end. It was time for my final act. At my workbench, I took out a single sheet of paper and a pen. The letter I wrote was brief, carefully worded, and devoid of the anger and pain I felt. It was a note from a watchmaker, precise and final. I sealed it in an envelope, addressed to Diane and Greg, and placed it on the mantel where Ellen's photo once stood. One last look at the empty room. One last memory of a life well lived. And I turned and walked out of the door for the final time. The click of the lock, the new lock that now belonged to Lena, was the sound of a promise finally fulfilled, and a slate finally wiped clean. The new key felt cold and alien in my hand, a small polished piece of brass that signified the end of a lifetime. The sound of the lock clicking shut behind me for the last time was not a goodbye, but a final, definitive period at the end of a long sentence. I did not allow myself a single backward glance as I climbed into my old truck, the familiar rumble of its engine a comfort in the foreignness of the moment. As I drove through the heart of Charleston, past cobblestone streets worn smooth by generations, the city felt different, no longer a home filled with my own history, but a beautiful, silent stranger I was leaving behind. I was not fleeing, I was simply moving on. I drove to the anonymous, quiet apartment I had rented, a place clean and sterile, devoid of the stories that had filled my shop for decades. From this place, I orchestrated the final act of my departure. A professional moving service, already paid in full, arrived at my shop to pack up my belongings. I imagined them walking through the rooms, their footsteps echoing in the empty spaces that used to be filled with the warmth of my life. They saw only objects, not memories. They saw boxes and labels, not Ellen's favorite armchair or the tiny handprints Diane had left on the kitchen wall as a child. They were just doing a job, but in their methodical, detached work, they were erasing the physical evidence of my existence. The shop and apartment became a hollow shell. My new keeper, Lena, sent a brief text. "Everything has been moved. The place is empty and ready for me to move in. It's perfect." Perfect. The word echoed in my mind with a bitter irony. It was perfect. Not for me, but for the people who thought they would inherit it. The calm before the storm was settling in. Diane and Greg were due back from their trip in a matter of hours. They were returning to Charleston, their minds buzzing with plans to sell my property and secure their future. They had no idea that their burden was no longer in the shop, but was about to become their biggest problem. The stage was set for their final, shocking discovery. The stillness of my new apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos I knew was about to unfold. I imagined Diane and Greg's return to Charleston. Their minds were undoubtedly buzzing with triumph, rehearsing the lines they would use to declare me incompetent. They would arrive at the shop, keys in hand, ready to begin their cruel conquest. I imagined their smiles, the smug confidence in their eyes, the complete and utter certainty of a plan they believed was foolproof. They would find the shop door locked, and then they would meet their first surprise. A few hours later, a notification on my phone confirmed their arrival. A small, discreet camera I had installed at the entrance. A final, cunning piece of my plan. Sent a motion alert. I watched through my phone screen as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Diane, dressed in a sharp business suit, stepped out, followed by a stone-faced Greg, briefcase in hand. They looked every bit the powerful, successful couple, a stark contrast to the old man they thought they were about to put away. They approached the front door with an air of entitlement, Diane fumbling in her purse for her keys. She inserted one into the lock, a lock she had used her entire life, and it simply didn't turn. A frown creased her brow. She tried again, then again, her movements becoming more frantic. "What's wrong with this thing?" she muttered. Greg, ever the analyst, moved to her side, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. "Let me try the back," he said, disappearing around the corner. Diane stood alone, jiggling the key, her frustration growing. Then the front door opened. Not for her, but for a young woman with a kind smile and a box of fresh-cut flowers in her hands. It was Lena. Diane stared, her mouth slightly ajar. "Excuse me," Diane said, her voice sharp with authority. "Who are you and what are you doing in my father's house?" Lena smiled, a calm and collected expression that instantly put Diane on the defensive. "This isn't your father's house," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's mine. My name is Lena, and I'm the new owner." Greg returned, his face pale with alarm. The key to the back door, a key he knew by heart, had also failed him. He stood in the entryway, staring at Lena and the floral arrangements she was carrying, his mind racing to process the impossible. The shock on their faces was palpable. Their foolproof plan had just hit its first, and most devastating, obstacle. Their smug confidence was gone, replaced by a deep and terrible confusion. The silence in the entryway was heavy, thick with the weight of their disbelief. Greg's face, pale with alarm, was locked on the young woman standing before them, Lena. The keys he had trusted for a lifetime lay useless on the floor, and the briefcase he carried felt like a hollow mockery of his professional pride. It was then, in the suffocating stillness, that Lena reached into the pocket of her sensible blazer and pulled out a single, crisp envelope. "He asked me to give this to you when you arrived," she said, her voice soft but firm, a stark contrast to their escalating panic. The envelope was white and simple, but the sight of it felt like a physical blow. It was addressed in a steady, familiar hand that Diane knew better than her own, her father's penmanship. Her voice, which had just moments ago been a furious shriek, now came out as a whisper. "What is that?" she asked, her eyes wide with a growing, terrible fear. Greg snatched it from Lena's hand, his pragmatism still clinging to the hope of a simple explanation. "It's probably a joke. He's gone senile. He thinks he's funny." But even as he said the words, the tremble in his hands betrayed his fear. Lena simply watched them, her face devoid of judgment, but with a quiet understanding that only deepened their humiliation. "He said everything you need to know is in there," Lena explained, her voice firm. She then quietly closed the door, leaving them standing alone in the empty entryway. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their frantic breathing. They were left with nothing but a final message from the man they had dismissed as a burden. The letter, my last word, my final attempt to make them understand, was a testament to the man they had forgotten. Diane stared at the envelope in Greg's shaking hand, her face pale, the anger in her eyes giving way to a terrible, growing fear. The final, devastating sting of my deception had just begun. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the silence, leaving them alone with the truth I had so carefully crafted. I watched them on my phone screen, their faces a canvas of unfolding horror. Greg, his hands trembling, tore open the envelope. The paper was simple, a single sheet of stationery with my familiar, steady handwriting. He began to read aloud, his voice low and disbelieving at first. "To my dear Diane and Greg," he read, his voice catching slightly. "If you are reading this, it means you have arrived, expecting to take possession of the home you believe you are entitled to. You have also learned, with some surprise, that the keys no longer work. That is because the antique shop and the apartment above it have been sold. The new owner, a young woman who, unlike you, understands the value of history, has moved in. I imagine you are both confused, perhaps even angry. Let me clarify." Greg's voice began to rise with a furious disbelief. He continued reading, his eyes darting across the page, seeking a word, a phrase, anything to prove this was a joke. But there were no jokes. The conversation I overheard on the phone was the final lesson of my life. I heard you. Diane, call me a burden. I heard you. Greg, outline your plan to sell my home and put me in a nursing home to solve your financial troubles. For a lifetime, I believed in restoring broken things, including a family that seemed to have lost its way. I gave you my time, my love, and my money, thinking that one day you would be grateful. Instead, you repaid me with a cold, calculated betrayal. So, I have wiped the slate clean. My home, my business, my life's work, it all belongs to someone else now. The proceeds of the sale, a sum far greater than you ever imagined, have been placed in a secure account that you will never find. My last act as your father is not one of vengeance, but of teaching you a final, necessary lesson. True inheritance is not a birthright. It must be earned. The letter ended there. Greg stood frozen, the paper shaking violently in his hands. Diane's face was a portrait of shattered innocence, the shock of a life she believed was hers, now gone. The silence was suffocating. Then Diane's voice, a raw, desperate whisper, broke it. "How could he do this? How could he betray me?" she cried. Greg's eyes, cold and sharp, turned on her. "You should have been more careful," he snarled, his own pain turning into a bitter, venomous rage. "Your father was never senile. He was playing us the entire time. He never trusted us. Because of you, this is all your fault." Their partnership, built on greed and lies, was now crumbling into a million tiny pieces. The empty entryway was now a courtroom, and in the deafening silence that followed, Diane and Greg were left to preside over the judgment of their own making. The fury that had exploded between them was now a bitter, cold frost that settled over the air. "You were the one who pushed for this," Diane shrieked, her voice raw and breaking. "You said we needed the money. You said we had to find a way out of our financial mess." Greg's face, a mask of cold fury, was a sight I had never seen before. "It was your idea to have him declared senile," he shot back. "It was your words that sealed our fate. Your father never trusted me, but he trusted you. And you repaid that trust by calling him a burden." He gestured around the empty room with a trembling hand, the space that was supposed to be their new beginning, now a monument to their spectacular failure. "A burden, Diane. He called you out on it. He heard you, all of it." The argument devolved into a venomous recitation of past grievances and a cruel tally of their own failures. The business deal that Greg's firm had bungled, the reckless spending that had plunged them into debt, the lies they had told their friends to maintain the illusion of success. With each angry word, their partnership, built on a foundation of greed and deceit, crumbled into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. They were no longer a united front. They were two desperate, cornered animals turning on each other. Their true characters laid bare in the empty space that had once been my home, and the consequences, as swift and precise as my watchmaker's hand, were only just beginning. The news of my abrupt departure and the sale of the antique shop spread through Charleston's tight-knit community like a wildfire. It was a scandal that had everything money, family betrayal, and a perfect, dramatic twist. Greg's colleagues at his financial firm, already wary of his past ethical missteps, heard the story and his professional reputation was in tatters. A man who couldn't be trusted by his own family, they reasoned, couldn't be trusted with their money. Diane, whose social standing was her most valuable currency, found her world crumbling around her. Her phone, which had just hours before been buzzing with text messages and calls from her friends, was now ominously silent. She was no longer the charming socialite with the perfect life. She was the cruel daughter who had tried to put her aging father in a nursing home for money. The doors of her social clubs and her professional network closed one by one, sealing her in a suffocating chamber of her own making. They were left with nothing, no money, no house, no friends, and a mountain of debt that was now their burden to bear. The slate was clean, not just for me, but for them as well. They were given a blank page, an opportunity to rebuild a life on their own terms, free from the comfortable, corrupting wealth that they believed was their birthright. But as I watched them on my phone screen, their faces twisted with rage and despair, I knew they hadn't learned the lesson. They were just angry they had lost the game. The drive out of Charleston felt less like a retreat and more like a pilgrimage. I left behind the chaos and the shame, the bitter recriminations of Diane and Greg, and the ghosts of a life I had so cherished. The roads unwound before me, taking me away from the cobblestone streets and the humid air toward a new beginning in the quiet, rolling hills of North Carolina. I had no destination, only a direction. My journey was not just geographical. It was a journey toward the man I had forgotten how to be. I found my new home in a small town named Asheville, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was a place that, like me, felt lived in and full of quiet wisdom. The people were kind and unpretentious. Their conversations about gardening and the weather, not market trends or real estate. I rented a small, unassuming space on a side street, a cozy workshop with a big window that overlooked a quiet park. It was here, surrounded by the scent of fresh wood and the steady, comforting ticking of my own creations, that I began to rebuild. My new life was simple, a stark contrast to the one I had left behind. I spent my days at my workbench, my hands, once again, repairing delicate gears and polishing worn brass. But this time, it was different. This time, I was not building a legacy for a family that did not want it. I was building a life for myself. I fixed watches for my new neighbors, a small honest trade that paid me in gratitude and simple kindness. I had no grand ambitions, no need for a massive fortune. All I needed was the steady rhythm of my work, the quiet company of my own thoughts, and the freedom to simply be. I was no longer a victim or a strategist. I was just John Harris, the watchmaker. The ticking of a new clock had begun, and it was a melody of peace, of freedom, and of a life reclaimed. My new life in Asheville was no longer about restoring antiques, but about restoring myself. I sat at my workbench, the afternoon sun warming my face as I polished the intricate face of a new watch I was building, a final masterpiece for myself. The quiet town, the simple friendships, the peace in my heart. It was a different kind of wealth. Diane and Greg were gone from my life, no longer an obstacle, no longer a burden. I didn't hate them. I simply pitied them. They were still lost in the pursuit of something external, something that could never fill the void in their souls. They had traded a father's love for a fleeting chance at fortune, and in doing so, they had lost both. I, on the other hand, had lost nothing. I had gained my freedom, my dignity, and a profound sense of purpose. These grandpa stories have taught me that God's plan is not always the one we expect, but it is always the one we need. I thought about the antique shop, about the memories of Ellen and Diane, the good times we had there. It was all a part of my journey, a beautiful but flawed tapestry that I had finally, and peacefully, unraveled, and in the silence, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had a new home, a new purpose, and a new understanding of what truly matters. I put my tools down, smiled to myself, and thanked God for giving me a second chance. The world had told me I was a burden, but God had shown me I was a man of value. My journey is a testament to the fact that while some bonds may be too broken to fix, our spirit is not. My advice to you, if you are listening to these grandpa stories, is to know the value of what you have before it is taken away. And if you have lost your way, know that it is never too late to find peace. Turn to God, and He will show you the way. If this story has touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring grandpa stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your impressions. To listen to the next compelling story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.